students, welcome to EduAid. Let's begin this session by some mind-boggling statements that all of us might have heard at some point in our life. We human beings have developed from monkeys. Some of you might have been told that you have eyes like your mother or your nose is just like your father's. And you might have also noticed that many of yours or your siblings' external features or even habits are a lot similar to your parents. So have you ever pondered upon all this? Is it really true that our ancestors were monkeys? Why do we look like our parents? Well, after this chapter, we'll be having answers to many such questions. So let's begin this chapter. Heredity and evolution. In this session, we'll be learning the various terms that are necessary for understanding this chapter. So whenever we are talking about heredity, the first thing that we need to know is genes. So what are genes? Students, in the reproduction chapter, we have learned that new organisms are formed from parents either by cell division in asexual reproduction or fusion of gametes in sexual reproduction. The cells that are involved in reproduction contain all the information that gets transferred to the child. Now, you'd want to know where or what in the cell contains all this information. The answer is genes. In class 9, we have learned that inside the nucleus, there are chromosomes that contain DNA. Gene is a unit of DNA which controls specific functions or traits or characteristics of an organism. Inside each chromosome, there are thousands of genes controlling various functions. So, for example, if you consider height as a trait, you will see that there is a specific gene controlling this trait. If you consider other traits like your eye color or your hair color or whether your hair is curly or straight, there are specific genes controlling its trait. So we see genes are basically units of heredity which transfer traits from parents to offsprings during reproduction. And the passing of these traits from one generation to another through genes is called heredity. And since this heredity information is stored in the genes, it is also called as genetic information. So now we know that genes are responsible why we inherit traits from our parents and why we look similar to our parents. But despite all these similarities, an offspring is never a true copy of its parents. In fact, no two individuals are exactly similar, and the individuals of a species differ from other by one trait or the other. For example, amongst yourself, if you see, some of you might have been having earlobes which are attached to the skin in this jawbone, whereas others will be having free earlobes. These differences are known as variations. So from the biological point of view, variation is the occurrence of differences among individuals of a species. Students, in our reproduction chapter, we have already learned that no biological process is 100% accurate. Whenever there is reproduction, variations are bound to occur in the DNA of the new organism. In asexual reproduction, these variations are very small, whereas in sexual reproduction, these variations are comparatively larger. For example, you can easily tell the difference between you and either of your parents. But if you consider another organism which reproduces asexually, for example, take a sugarcane field. It is very difficult to see any apparent variation among the organisms. In the sugarcane plant, you can see that almost all the plants look almost similar. So from this, we can say that the number of successful variations is maximized by the process of sexual reproduction. And these variations, they give rise to evolution. So evolution is the change in the heritable characteristics of biological populations over successive generation. Now let us understand few more terms like genotype. Genotype represents the genetic constitution of an organism. It represents all the hereditary information of that organism. Whereas phenotype represents all the traits that we can see, which means phenotypes are the expressed characters. For example, in human beings, the eye color, the height, your hair color, etc. are phenotypes. So phenotypes are basically the result or combination of the genotype that we have and the environmental factors that affect us. So students, this was an introduction to the chapter Heredity and Evolution. In our next session, we will be discussing about accumulation of variations. Thank you.